Welcome to this session on Judaism and pluralism in the context of global diversity. We are in the midst of a workshop of scholars of Judaism precisely working on this issue. We spent the whole day today. But we wanted to have this public session to present the project. This itself, the work on Judaism, is part of a larger project which is sponsored by ResetDoc, an association in Milan, Italy. And Sofia De Benedictis, in a moment, will introduce the work of ResetDoc. And then we move to present the general project, which is co-directed, co-organized by my colleague, Jocelyn Cesari, and myself. And then, after we've discussed the entire project, then we'll have 4 representatives of the working group on Judaism. They will sort of discuss the kind of issues that Judaism is facing with respect to pluralism and global diversity. Myself, I am an emeritus professor of sociology, theology and religious studies here at Georgetown University, a senior fellow at the Berkeley Center. The Berkeley Center sponsors this event as well as part of the whole project, and the event is also sponsored by the Center for Jewish Civilization. Unfortunately, simultaneously with this event, there is another big event organized by the Berkeley Center, so the director of the center wanted to be very much with us, Professor Tom Banchoff, who is not only the founding director of the Berkeley Center, but also the vice president for global engagement here at Georgetown University. So I welcome all of you in the name of the Berkeley Center. And now I'm going to pass on the mic to Sofia De Benedictis. They will present the voice of ResetDoc, who is the organizer of this project, which we call it B-Theo, or Theologies and Practices of Religious Pluralism within the Abrahamic religious traditions. So, Sofia.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here at Georgetown, and in particular, thank you to the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. And I'm proud to present the role of ResetDoc in the B-Theo project. So my name is Sofia De Benedictis, and I am Events and Program Manager at ResetDoc. ResetDoc was founded shortly after 9/11, on the conviction that dialogue between cultures and religions is not merely an ethical aspiration, but a necessity for the survival of open and pluralistic societies. Today, this necessity has only grown more urgent. Globalization, while creating new encounters, has also intensified controversies and conflicts, not only between different cultural and religious traditions, but often even more painfully within them. We see cruel and bloody evidence of this reality from Ukraine to the Arabian Peninsula, where religious identities are too often entangled within violence and division. This is the fractured world to which theological traditions must now respond, not by retreating into absolutes, but by rethinking how difference is understood within the divine economy. The theologies and practices of religious pluralism, B-Theo, which ResetDoc has in part conceived, launched, and coordinated, represents one of our most ambitious initiatives in facing this challenge. It draws inspiration from the vision of Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti, the vision of cultural encounter, where fraternity embraces difference not by erasing it, but by engaging it seriously, critically, and respectfully. Yet B-Theo aims to go deeper than dialogue as a method. It poses a theological challenge to each major religious tradition. How does each faith theologically understand the existence of other faiths? What is the place of religious diversity within a framework that affirms a divine plan and a revealed truth? And how are the tensions between mission and dialogue, between proclamation and humility, navigated from within? And crucially, we are interested in focusing on the status of truth given to the religious other. What is the temperature of that truth or falsehood? How is the other interpreted as a bearer of a partial divine blessing, as a tragic error, as heresy, or as a reflection of the same divine mystery approached differently? This delicate but essential question lies at the heart of our inquiry. Reset Doc has framed this project with these questions at heart. This approach is deeply rooted in the intellectual legacy of figures like Nasser Abu Zaid, one of our founders, who courageously showed how revealed truth must be understood in light of historical consciousness. A lesson crucial not only for Islam, but for every tradition that speaks of revelation. We are grateful that from the very beginning, we found in the Berkeley Center at Georgetown not only an institutional partner, but a true intellectual companion, committed to rigorous scholarship, to interreligious engagement, and to the exploration of religious pluralism in its deepest dimensions. Over the past years, with the support of the Berkeley Center and alongside other partners, including the Foundation for Religious Sciences in Bologna, the Haifa Laboratory for Religious Studies, and the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem, we have been able to build a strong international network of scholars. We have already explored these core questions with working groups dedicated to Catholicism, Protestantism, and Islam. Today, we mark an important expansion with the work dedicated to Judaism, engaging leading scholars across Orthodox, traditional, and Reform traditions. Our focus remains consistent to explore how each tradition has historically and theologically interpreted the other, and to uncover the internal resources available for recognizing, respecting, and even celebrating religious difference. I'll wrap up. Looking ahead, Reset Doc plans to extend this inquiry to the major Asian religions, so that's the next phase, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Chinese traditions, and to continue disseminating our findings through the vtheo.net, so that's v-theo.net, and I invite you all to look at it. Unfortunately, I can't show it. We also continuously encourage there's an open standing call for contributions. So please look at that and see if there's any way you would like to contribute. And the upcoming volume on Islam is coming out forthwith with Springer, so we're very excited about that. And finally, Reset Doc has not only initiated, together with our partners, but continues to drive the VTHEO project with the conviction that real peace and fraternity, as Fratelli Tutti teaches, are impossible without honest theological engagement and without the plurality of the human religious experience. And I thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry I was a bit nervous.
Thank you. And now I'll give you the floor to Jocelyn, who will present the project, how it was born, and the steps we have taken so far before coming to this work on Judaism.
Good evening. My name is Jocelyn Cesari. I am a senior fellow at the Berkeley Center. And a few years back, we started to think of looking at religious tradition in the global world. And the term that came very strongly to create a sort of coherence in the project was pluralism. And I want to insist here on a few features of this project that, in our opinion, puts it differently or puts it in a different light of other attempts to look at religion and pluralism. The first one is that we are really not focusing on interfaith relations, which is usually the expected way that religious pluralism is understood. We are looking at the way that all religious traditions are challenged by the condition of the world of today, which is coexistence of lifestyle, set of values, sometimes very close to one another in the same space, and sometimes very far away, but nonetheless very challenging. And from this perspective, it's atheism or relativism that are really today the point of topic and contention about pluralism across religious tradition. And we are also taking into account very seriously the debate within each religious tradition. And we realize sometimes that the debate within are even more acute or intense than across religious tradition. And so we are trying to use this kind of grid to look at the challenge of today, as it was said, across Islam, Judaism, Orthodoxy, Christianity, Protestant and Catholic. And so what is for us also an asset is to be able to compare across the tradition and be able to find not points of similarity, but also points of divergence on this major issue of pluralism that goes beyond tolerance. We know we all live in a diverse world, and we have to deal with the diversity. Accepting it is another issue. And some group accept it, some others don't. And we try to find out how and why this is happening, not only within, but as I said, also across religious tradition. So the goal is to feed this new website that Sophia mentioned. We have a complete platform devoted to the project called VTheo, and we are also publishing. As it was mentioned, the Islam Working Group has finished its work, started in 2022, and it's finishing this year, and it's going to be the first volume of the Springer collection that will be devoted to the project. But more than that, we also would like to engage with people involved in these continuous challenges, people of faith or lack of faith, dealing with this diversity and this relativism. And that's also a very important part of the project, to deal with the impact or the echo that some of this discussion here can have on the ground, as we said. And with that, I would like to give the floor to my two co-conveners of the Judaism workshop, and then to two members of the group. So I let each of you introduce themselves before you address the audience. Okay.
So hello, good evening. My name is Yochi Fisher. I'm from the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute. And we work on this question together with the Berkeley Center for many years, and with Jocelyn about question of religion and democracy. And now we are very happy to take part in this project on pluralities and pluralism. I'm working on this religion and secularism in Israel, and do you want me to go to it now or later?
Yeah, no, please.
Okay,
yeah.
so in regarding to this question of pluralism, I'm working on the question, I want to speak now a little bit about the question of the challenge for secularism or secularist in Israel regarding pluralism, and I will explain what I mean. So, you know, we know that the secularist framework and ideas guarantee or wanted to guarantee freedom of religion and pluralism, etc. But we know also that in the context of nationalism, not just in the Israeli case, but other nationalisms as well, the secular national regimes suppressed pluralism or religious pluralism and tried to build a homogeneous national ethos, thank you. And in the Israeli case, it was the homogeneous national secular sabrate, called in Hebrew, identity that was in the first 50 years or 60 years of the state that was neglecting or trying to overcome the differences and have one melting pot of secular Jewish entity. And this is changing in the last 20 years or more. And religious differences and religion is coming back in many ways. And here we have here the secularists who used to think about themselves as the main body or the main sabre idea suddenly has a problem. And the problem is not just people in the state and people are becoming more and more religious. The problem is that secularization, not secularism, the secularization as a process succeeded. And this I learned from you, Jose, the important difference between secularization and secularism. So secularization processes succeeded, and they change also the religion and many kinds of religious practices. And then we have now this phenomena of more religious groups and people want to take part or taking part in the Israeli public arena and wants to take their share. For example, I give an example. In the academia, okay? More and more religious people are coming into the academia, or Orthodox religious, coming into the academia, and they said, okay, I understand, and they're coming to the academia because they are more secularized in a way, and it doesn't mean they are not religious, they are religious, but they want to have self-expression, and they understand they want to have education, etc. So they're coming to the secular universities and said, okay, now give us our rights that we learned from the secular world, and we want to have, to learn in separation.
Gender separation.
Gender separation, so when men and women separate. And then the secular universities has to ask themselves, what are the limits of our tolerance or pluralism? What are our limits? Can we allow classes of just women and classes of just men in our universities? It's a very big debate in Israel now. And the debate is I think, is a consequence of the secularization that's changing the society, the religious societies, but in the same time of more religion coming into the public sphere. So the way the pluralist, secularist people used to think about themselves has to change now. And they have to rebuild their borders. So this is, yeah.
Thank you, Yochi.
Hello, my name is Uriel Simonson. I'm from the University of Haifa. I'm also the founding director of the Haifa Laboratory for Religious Studies at the University of Haifa. The laboratory is an academic framework that brings together faculty members, young stage, early career researchers, and graduate students from a variety of disciplines, but who are all interested either in religions or especially in interreligious dynamics. Our premise is, well, we have a few premises. One of them is that Israeli society is highly religious. This is, of course, founded on surveys that have shown that around 80% of Israeli society, whether Jews or Arabs, have some level of religious orientation. And a second important premise is the fact that religious communities are far more than mere spiritual and ritualistic entities, but rather address a variety of social and civic issues. This, of course, goes back to antiquity. It's not an innovation of the 21st century, but it's still very much valid in the 21st century. And what we try to do is to get academics to work with religious communities, a variety of religious communities, in order to address social and civic issues. And one of the most burning matters that we're currently working on is addressing the terrible gap between Jews and Arabs in Israel by working with not only religious communities, but also with religious ideas, religious ideals, and religious values. And here we find that although diversity may seem as a challenge, it's in fact also a means for attaining pluralism. As an example, I will give you the fact that about a year and a half ago, we've established in Haifa a multi-faith forum consisting of some 25 religious leaders, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, and also Ahmadis, men and women, all whom represent actual communities. And we started to work with them with the question, how can we find a way to live together in such a diverse city, religiously diverse city and ethnically diverse city as Haifa? And we found that although pluralism was yet to be achieved, diversity was very instrumental in the path of achieving this pluralistic perspective, because it allowed people to appreciate the richness of the human landscape in which they are embedded. And by being exposed to a variety of ideas and theologies and practices, they gradually become appreciative of this diversity and more accommodating towards it. And that eventually, the process that we've witnessed has led them to adopt a more pluralistic approach. And we've created this model of working with religious leaders in Haifa, and we're trying now to implement it in other parts of the country. Israel is not only highly religious and highly religiously diverse, but also highly religiously segregated. And there are urban centers throughout Israel in which Jews and Arabs share the public sphere, and often more than that. And what we try to do is enter those urban spaces, work with local religious leaders in order to bring them to listen to each other, work with each other, and eventually develop that pluralistic perspective toward society at large.
Thank you. Ronit?
Okay. Thank you. My name is Ronit Irshai from Bar-Ilan University, and from the Gender Studies Department at Bar-Ilan University. I was the former head of this department. And my fields of research are Judaism, Jewish law, and gender studies, and also gender theologies. And in this context, I would like to speak about religious feminism in Israel, which is part of my research. And speaking about pluralism, I think that religious feminists bringing to the table missing women voices. I mean, for generations, women voices couldn't be heard in Jewish traditional books, law, philosophy, spirituality in general. And now, in the last 50 years, we witness actually quite a revolution in this regard. And religious feminists says this sector within the religious society in Israel has many successful, many successes, I would say, in all parts of the religious society. Like women are now part of the Beit Midrash, of the study hall. They study Torah, they study Jewish law, and they are even being ordained still privately within this sector of religious society, and are taking a bigger part in Jewish life, not only in Torah study, but also in rituals, in the synagogue, more egalitarian. We witness more egalitarian synagogues within Orthodoxy in Israel. And also, they have successes in the rabbinical courts, in the national sphere, in the family, in the structure of the family in a more egalitarian way, and in more other arenas. However, although I think that religious feminism is actually the most vibrant movement within religious society now in Israel, and actually changing the face of Judaism in general. Still, religious feminists facing at least 3 challenges. The first one is from inside, from conservative fundamentalist religious people that, of course, they disagree. They want to leave women in their traditional duties, like within the family, raising children, and so on and so forth. They are also very much against LGBTQ struggles, which religious feminists are very much in favor, and things like that. So these are internal challenges. It's both in terms of Jewish law and also theology, and of course sociology. Other challenges are from the secular society, because if religious conservatives tell the feminists, you know, you're not religious enough, because if you were religious, truly religious believers, you would obey to what God want, and you won't develop all these new ideas. So sometimes even secular feminists tell religious feminists, you're not feminist enough. Because if you were a real feminist, you won't collaborate with the patriarchal establishment of the religious people. So it is both from the religious and the secular that religious feminists suffer those kind of challenges. And also from the state of Israel, because in Israel we don't have a separation of church and state. So at least in cases of marriage and divorce, it is upon to the rabbinical courts to decide in those issues. And there, within rabbinical courts, the main judges, dayanim in Hebrew, are from the ultra-Orthodox section. Not all of them, but most of them. And obviously they have an old patriarchal gender notions. So women who want to get a divorce are struggling really heavy difficulties in this regard. So, and this is in the name of the state, because the only way to be married and divorced in Israel is through the religious courts. For Jews, it's rabbinical courts. For Muslim, Sharia courts. For Christians, their religious courts. So these are the only options, although there are some other options, but not officially or things like that. So even the state and religious feminists are actually finding themselves fighting rabbinical courts. This is really a flagship. How do I say it? Flagship of the battles that religious feminists find themselves doing for enhancing more gender justice for women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yaakov?
Thank you. My name is Yaakov Yadgar. I'm an Israel Studies professor at Oxford University, and my work, generally speaking, deals mostly with issues of nationalism, the case of Israeli nation building and Zionist ideology, and the way they cope with the challenges that the Zionist ideologies claim to Jewish history pose, specifically in the context of Zionism, the mainstream viewing itself as a secular and secularizing movement. Now, in the current and I guess most dominant discussion on nationalism, and I think since 2016, it's just impossible to ignore the fact that we are experiencing a resurgence of a very aggressive kind of nationalism. Much of the discussion on this resurgence has, I guess, justifiably so, focused on how nationalist identity is built on the negation of the other. It's almost impossible to understand this resurgence without noting that much of the nationalist impetus is built on this idea that the we, the us, the internal group is constructed exactly by the negation of the not we. And the question that opens up is how do we critique this? How do we speak against it? What resources we have to think beyond this binary of the us versus them of nationalism? My argument is that thinking through the Jewish experience, and exactly through the Jewish experience, not only historically, but also through how modern nation-statism tries to nationalize and render Judaism to fit within that mold, how looking through that perspective can suggest venues of critiquing this nation-statist xenophobia, if I can use that harsh word, through the internal view. Meaning what this nationalist identity construction does to the traditions, the pluralities that people for whom the nation state speaks carry. To put it maybe in a slightly less convoluted way, nation states, and the Israeli nation state is not different than others, are built through the creation of a unified identity, the we, that carries within it the histories of those people who came from different divergent ways and traditions. In the Israeli and Jewish case, this is obvious, too obvious to ignore. While in other places we can say, well, they have the territory and only on this territory now you have a unified sovereignty imposed. Jews have been historically, as Jews, right, since we use the term of Judaism and Jews, the rabbinical Judaism specifically, have been diverse in geographical locations, in the way they understand Jewish tradition, the way they understand Jewish law, the Jewish identity, the way they practice them, the languages they speak to carry them, the way they live their life as Jews. The state has viewed this plurality as menacing. It viewed it as a danger to the very project of nation-state building. And in the Israeli case, the ethos of statism has employed a mechanism of melting pot, which I may, as the name suggests, to melt away and to recreate a new Jewish identity in the image of the Zionist ideological model. While the state views this plurality as menacing and dangerous, the meaning of Jewish identity carried by these various traditions have celebrated the plurality. Judaism have always knew that Jewish people have always knew that the way they practice their Judaism is not the only way. That there are other ways, that they are sometimes challenging. There are other ways that they, often delegitimize, but still acknowledge as viable claims to Jewish identity. I offer the provocation of viewing this as tribalism and then rehabilitating the tribalist discourse as a way to speak back at nation-statism. So if much of the attention, as I said earlier, on nation-statism focuses on the way it pushes away the other, I want to highlight the way the nation-state tries to homogenize, as Yochi said earlier, through the secularly successful project to homogenize the national identity as a way to challenge this national construction. In a way, this offers us, this provocation, again, admitted provocation, offers us, how would I say, idealization, utopias if you want, or possible imaginaries, political imaginaries of political configurations of power which are not conducive to the nation-statist homogenizing and negation of plurality and of others. Federative, tolerant to an extent framework in this case of Jewish identity, but I do believe that the Jewish case here is playing out a script that is universal, the script of modern nation statism.
Thank you, Yaakov. So now the floor is open to you if you have any questions or comments for the group and for the project in general.
I think if I may say something so that while you think about questions or comments, the fact that these issues are today general within all religious traditions and within basically all democratic politics. As we know, this is part also of the debates about the United States and the Trump administration and making America great again and the role of white Christian evangelism and patriotism and how much this is a Christian nation or not. I come from Spain myself, and obviously there's a very strong Catholic conservative group trying to bring back Catholicism into a post-Catholic Spain. And we could go on to basically every country in the world today in religious traditions. In India, these issues are debated. In Turkey, in other Islamic countries, this is the case. So I think that for us, and especially Jocelyn and me, that sort of coordinate the project, the really interesting thing is both learning intensively from each of the particular cases, but seeing how today in our globalized world of networks, connections, those issues reverberate everywhere, and there are crisscrossing influences on the so-called global culture wars, which repeat themselves very similarly in different countries. Issues of gender, issues of who are we in the nation, who is the enemy within, who is the enemy without. Those kind of issues, I think, reverberate everywhere. So this is what makes this project both urgent, but also really relevant, I think, for our times. Mm-hmm. So please.
Thank you very much for your presentations. So I want to maybe challenge members of the panel, if that's okay, because we've heard some presentations about about Jewish life and Jewish thought within Israel, and I'm thinking we're thinking in a broader sense, right? We've come here to discuss Judaism and pluralism. So I'd like to ask each of you, or some of you, or whoever's kind of willing to answer, what have you learnt from your studies and these particular research projects that can speak to Judaism and pluralism in a broader diasporic context? Thanks.
Do you want us to take this on?
Yeah, please. You.
So thank you. I would love to jump in and address this because much of my thinking recently has been on this. Let me put it this way. Historically, there's no denying the fact that the past, 8 decades have been characterized by nation-statist Israeli dominance in shaping Jewish identity not only in Israel but also outside of Israel. Israel has been playing, the Israeli state has been playing a very strong and heavy hand in rendering Jewish identity outside of Israel a matter of affiliation to the state. Since the outbreak of war after the attacks in October the 7th, 23, we have seen a phenomena of a growing Jewish critique or critique by Jewish people or Jews of the state that is often framed as a matter of identity politics, meaning that people claim that as Jews they have this or that argument vis-a-vis the state of Israel, a critical argument usually against the state of Israel. And people who were critical of the fact that the nation state, the Israeli state, is taking such a heavy role in forming or shaping Jewish identity outside of the state, were celebrating this, or have been celebrating this as a healthy expression of a Jewish resistance to the Israeli nation-statist dominance. I want to say that in this context, we still have to see whether that resistance offers offers a positive understanding of Jewish identity beyond the negation of the state. Because if it remains just Jewish anti-Zionism, it is still defined by the state, only negatively so this time. So if Jewish plurality ends there, we don't get that far. If the reaction to the war encourages a renewed engagement with the traditions in a way that would render them meaningful and applicable and livable in modern times in diverse ways, then pluralism would gain. That's my take.
Yes, please. You wanted to say something? No. Okay, please, the floor is yours.
So, particularly the colleague from the University of Haifa, but all of you, I'd be interested in your opinions. How do you think the different groups in Israel that welcome diaspora delegations or diaspora groups or young people, university students or younger coming to Israel can represent the pluralism that exists in Israel. So what made me think about this is when I look at the itineraries of people I know who visit Israel on these organized trips, either through some civic association, a birthright, or a travel agency, they typically only go to the Jewish religious sites. And it seems like even as just a pure tourist sightseeing perspective, a missed opportunity, but it also seems to come from a worldview that sounds like it's a little bit at odds with the worldview that you're discussing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to address this?
I just want to add to the question is an anecdotal story that a colleague from a U.S. university told me that a while back when, I think it was in the early 2000s when Israel was under the heavy impression of the Second Intifada, violence in the streets. Following that, the children of that colleague from the US were about to embark on one of those trips. And the parents were concerned mostly about security. And they approached the organizers, who promised them that there's no danger, they're not going to see a single Arab in the visit. That was their impression of Israel.
The point is made. So please, you're here.
So I would say the following, because you started out the question by asking how can young people coming to Israel could later on represent in Israel in a way that will show the pluralism or the plurality. That's the question, because if they want to represent the plurality, that's not going to be a difficulty because there is plurality. But if they want to represent or to speak about pluralism, that's going to be a more difficult task. And unfortunately, that's the reality. I think, obviously, organizations like Birthright have a known agenda to present Israel in a particular way that will suit a certain perspective over the reality. And I think it's, to an extent, the obligation or the duty of American Jewry to be critical about those who provide these kind of tours or services in Israel and ask themselves whether, by going through the itineraries, whether these in fact assist in representing the complex reality in Israel. I think that's the first step. A second step would be preparatory discussions that should be held over here. Some education and knowledge never hurts. And thirdly, perhaps it's high time. Birthright has been around for what now? 20, 30 years, I think. I think it's high time that we think of other alternatives to that particular scheme.
So just to continue what Uri said, Israel has so many faces, as you obviously know, and in a feminist spirit or feminist epistemology, I would say that it's always a good advice to reveal or to expose the hidden agendas of those organizations who are taking young people to see Israel. And when you understand the agenda, you can understand what kind of Israel they will see. They can see Tel Aviv, they can see the universities, they can meet religious feminists, or they can see only a religious site or nationalist, I don't know, from a nationalist perspective. So I totally agree with Uri that American Jews should be more critical about that.
I would say all Jews in diaspora, not only Americans. This goes back to the question of diaspora and how much the creation of the state, the Israeli state, has changed. Indeed, the diversity here, I go back to the point of Yaakov, the diversity of Jewish group outside Israel. It's impossible today to live the religion or to experience the religion without having to posit yourself vis-a-vis the Israeli state. And I think it has taken a toll on the religious diversity or plurality that existed before. Maybe, to go back to your point, the plurality does still exist. The pluralism, I'm not sure it's still there even in diaspora.
I'm not sure it was there to begin with.
Yeah.
But before Meir asks a question, I just want to add another point here.
Please, yeah.
As you could have probably guessed, I'm somewhat critical of the situation. But at the same time, I would also note that my impression, at least, from hearing the voices here, is that there is often an oversimplistic view of the reality that we are experiencing on a daily basis. And the perspective that is often adopted is somewhat binaric, of right and wrong, of good and bad, and etc. I think our work and our research and the work of many others suggest that this is anything but a binaric reality. And there are a variety of hues in this picture. And it's very important to convey this complexity and this variety to people living outside because they're not always aware of it. And it's important to nuance.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. Uriel, just a question for you and perhaps for others. I mean, we are forgetting that we are in the Middle East. Israel is located in the Middle East. It's not only relation between Jews and Arabs or relation among Jews or Jews and men and women. And I see your work that you are doing in Haifa that is outside of the university, but it comes from the university. And it relates to Israel, but my question is, do you think that it carries any promise to the Israel in the Middle East? Can Israel be give a message, give a role model to the region? Can the region succeed without Israel? You know, when we have Iran and we have all of those, okay? So, are you creating something? I mean, you know, this is because of today is the Independence Day, so I'm starting something.
So I will say this.
Well, can I say something before you
Yeah,
answer?
for sure.
No, just, Mel, in your question, it sounds like Israel is not part of the Middle East. Israel, what is happening in Israel is exactly what is happening in other parts of the Middle East. So Israel is not,
It's not Iran, and it's not Saudi, and it's not Egypt. Come on, it's not the same.
it's not, and Egypt is not, and Egypt is not Iran.
democracy.
So
Let's take the democratic discussion out of that. So please
no,
go ahead.
it's not just about democracy. It's not just about democracy. If you think,
Please, no discussion among the audience towards the
if
podium.
you think about the way the authoritarian regime, if you think about the religious and traditionalist people, if you think about half of the people, 50% of the people in Israel came from.
And it's not Iran, and it's not Saudi.
Okay, but it's part. But the Israeli culture is 77 tomorrow years, and even before in the Middle East. So it's part of the Middle East, and there's the characteristics, of the Middle East in many respects. Not in always, but in many respects. It's a little bit like Egypt, and a little bit like other place, and the only thing the only point I'm trying to stress is we should stop thinking about Israel as something, as a villa in the jungle, right? We are part of the Middle East, if we like it or not.
Where is the answer to my question?
No, it's not the answer.
It's a
preliminary. Now, Uriel will answer.
Please, Uriel, and also you wanted to say something, please?
Yeah. So I actually agree with you in the sense that Israel is not part of the Middle East. And I think that's actually a problem. I think Israelis, specifically Jews, are not making an effort to be part of the Middle East. Think about, for instance, how many Jews speak Arabic. It begins there. We are living in the Middle East, but we are, for many of us, the experience is as if we were part of Europe or somewhere else. And I think by first of all coming into terms with the fact that we are part of the Middle East, it means that we need to appreciate the local culture. It means that we need to find ways to communicate with our neighbors in a more direct and egalitarian way, and not in a way that is often patronizing, as if we have a message to deliver to the others. And I think if we hope one day to contribute to the region in which we live, we first of all need to consider ourselves part of that region. That's key. And as far as what we're doing in Haifa, whether that could be offer some kind of contribution to the reality in which we live, what we're trying to achieve in Haifa is first and foremost getting people out of their comfort zones, getting people to lower the barriers between different communities. People are living within segregated communities, consuming information from third-party sources rather than coming into direct dialogue, and building a variety of images, not to mention stereotypes about the other. And the first step in order to break that terrible rift that exists between different communities is by getting them to talk to one another, to learn about each other, and to appreciate each other, not to mention to develop a sense of empathy towards one another. And once you develop those basic tools, you can later on think about talking about the big picture issues.
Thank you. No more questions, comments? Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I was curious as to what you think the effects are of different diasporic groups within Israel, so like the potential conflicts and tensions between Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, for example? Like how are those resolved?
Yes.
I want to say something about this. Thank you for the question, because it raises an issue regarding the very conversation and the very language we use about Israel. We've used here diaspora Jewry almost unreflectively, as if Israel is the center and all Jews outside of Israel are diaspora. I think it's an obvious fact that Israel is a collection of diasporas. And a very helpful but neglected way of understanding Israel, understanding Israeli history, I would argue, is to view it as exactly a center where different diasporas interact while bringing their political traditions, not just religious traditions, ways of viewing the world, and then interacting not only with each other but also with others. You mentioned Ashkenazim and Mizrahim. Obviously, to this day, a constitutive tension that is often denied. Amazing to visit Israel. After having left the country a few years ago, I come and visit anytime, and every time I see this continuously denied. It's fascinating to see how the discourse doesn't allow for it. But there are also other insights that can be gained from viewing Israel exactly as such a collection or amalgam of different diasporas. For example, it is interesting to see that people often ignore the fact that Israel was established by Russians. People who emanated from the Russian Empire, so Russian at large. And to assume that by living their homeland in the sense where they were born, to go to their homeland in the sense of what they saw as their national territory. To assume that by doing that they've kind of shed away any sense of the political and other traditions they came from is just wrong. And then when you do take this into consideration, you can see some interesting affinities. For example, in the understanding of territory, the understanding of use of violence as a political tool, the understanding of the very creation of Jewish identity as a matter of, it's a modern rendition of Jewish identity as a matter of blood that one cannot rid oneself of, even if one fully converts. And we've had an interesting discussion on this earlier today. The issue of this, if I can, I've used the word ethnic plurality with its intra-Jewish ethnic plurality. The fact that the conversation is often denied on this, I think, is a great mistake, and exactly following the line of your question would help us see how plurality of Jewish ways of being in the world is viable.
I want to comment.
Please go ahead.
I want to be more optimistic regarding although the situation in Israel now it's not, but I'm from myself, if I may say something personal. I was raised, I'm from a Sephardic origin, what we used to call Sephardic origin, now we say Mizrahi, both my parents were born in Afghanistan. My grandmothers didn't know how to read and write, and my parents immigrate to Israel beginning after the establishment of the State of Israel. And obviously, and it cannot be denied, Mizrahi Jews were discriminated. Obviously, it's not. I think these are facts. Okay. But now the question is, how do you raise your children, and what do you tell them, and how to bridge this gap? And I think that during the 77 years since the establishment of the State of Israel, this gap starting to being closed. And now, I think in the last perhaps 20 years, something like this, political interests are trying to to enlarge the rift that was exist and it still exists, but for political reasons, they're trying to, to do this again, or to put a finger on this and to perhaps to enlarge this rift. And I really, I'm so very much against it, because when you look at the Israeli society, let's take the Israeli kitchen. Okay, let's speak about food. It's totally fusion. Yes, despite the fact that they dislike gefilte fish, but the Ashkenazi fish, yeah. But the Israeli kitchen is totally a fusion between all kinds of tradition, and this is perhaps you will think that this is not a serious issue, but I think it is. And intermarriage between Ashkenazi and Sephardic is also increasing. Like my children are a mixture of Ashkenazi and Sephardic. My son who got married, his wife is also a mixture between her mother is from Algerian origin and her father is from a German origin. Okay, so my granddaughters now, they're, I don't know what, quarter this, quarter that. So if we look at in a larger picture, I think the state of Israel is doing, many wrongs, but in this regard, the Israeli society is getting better and not vice versa.
I just want to add another perspective to this. I think Jews hailing from Arab countries have a distinct role in not only interrelations within Jewish society, but also between Jews and Arabs. Jews living in Arab countries throughout history have exemplified on numerous occasions instances of life together, harmonious life together with their Arab neighbors. We have examples from the medieval period, we have examples from the early modern period, and this heritage came along with them to Israel. My laboratory is not only working in Haifa, but is also working in a town called Ramla. There, it's a town that is something like 30% of it's a 80,000, size of 80,000 residents. 30% of those residents are non-Jews, Arabs. And I'm about to finish. I would venture and say that probably something like 90% of the Jews living in Ramla voted for some kind of right-wing party or religious party. So you can't accuse them of being left or overly liberal from a Western perspective. But that said, many of them exemplify good neighborly relations with their Arab neighbors, despite the fact that they hold right-wing political views. And why is that? Because they brought with them to Israel, their parents or their grandparents, a tradition of life together with their Arab neighbors, and they brought it with them to Ramla or to other towns where there is Jewish Arab presence. And so I think we can typify Mizrahi Jews as largely right-wing, but at the same time they have a very unique role as bridging the gap between Jews and Arabs, given that heritage that goes back hundreds of years back.
Thank you. I think on this optimistic note, I hope we can close this discussion. Thank you for your attention and for coming here. And to be continued, because this is only the beginning of the working group on Judaism and pluralism, so we'll have other occasions to exchange and present maybe some results, maybe reinforce the optimism here. Thank you very much. Good evening.